say that that Europe has indeed progressed significantly. Not only are you still ahead in small satellites, but you now have Diet Pepsi as well. So, thank you very much. It's certainly a pleasure to be here, and certainly the first thing I have to do, without a doubt, is to thank the British Interplanetary Society for coming through remarkably well. I think they have done an amazing job. Alistair Scott, Scott Hatton, Stewart have done just an astounding job of putting this together, and I have been very impressed by what has occurred. I certainly hope this is the first of many in Europe. I think this is working extremely well, and I appreciate it very much. And I also agree with the earlier comments. It was fascinating to see the surface of a comet. Those are indeed, I think, remarkable photos that were just been absolutely amazing, truly fascinating all the way along. I appreciate it very much. What I'd like to do is to give you a sense, at least. The title of this is, why aren't we there? What's the problem? Why are we having so much trouble reducing cost? And I would argue that I think probably it is the case that Europe is still ahead of the United States in that regard. And I think there are probably some fairly good reasons for that. But one of the things I would like to do and encourage in my talk, and I would suggest probably in the other talks as well, is that I believe these charts exist. They're out in the CD and so on. There's not that much point actually in going through charts. I'll use them sort of to start the discussion. But more than anything else, what really matters is the discussion. That is to say, talking about it. Trying to figure out what it is that has gone right, what it is that has gone wrong, how do we go about fixing it. So I certainly strongly encourage throughout the talk, questions, comments, nasty remarks, throw things, preferably money, whatever it is, let's talk about it and try and see what we can do to make things work better. That's what this is all about. How do we go about making that happen? There are obviously some companies that are doing it remarkably well. I think Surrey is still the leader, without a doubt. Sir Martin, I think you've done a truly remarkable job. And I think it's appreciated by everyone. But, there is still a great deal that needs to be done. And how do we go about finding the best ways to do it? So with that in mind, let's take a look at where we are. The new budget reality. I think it is clear that there is a huge amount that wants to be done in space. What is possible is enormous in terms of what we can do, and yet by and large we are limited in almost all of this by budget realities. That is to say, things are much more expensive than what they should be. One of the ones that I find the most fascinating is some millionaire, and I do not even remember now who it is rebuilding the Titanic. And they are literally rebuilding the entire Titanic for $500 million. And that fascinates me because $500 million in the space program, at least in the United States, is a small satellite. So for $500 million, I can either buy the Titanic or I can buy a spacecraft that sits on half of this desk. And you look at it and you say, why is that possibly the case? What is it that somehow makes that so dramatically valuable in some regard that it has to work? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But in any case, that's the nature of the problem. It's clear that the budgets are not where they would like to be. They are larger in the United States as a whole than they are most anywhere else, but they are nonetheless still not enough to get to where it is we would like to go. The issue is that we really can't change the budget very much. I mean, it would be nice if we could go to our respective governments and say we'd like to double the space budget and so on. And I suppose we could say that all we want to, but it's safe to say nobody's going to listen, right? So the budget is what it is. The question is, how do we respond to it? How do we go about doing things in a way that really makes sense? So that's sort of my idea of what the budget has been like, at least. And nowadays things have changed a little bit. So now we go to that one, which is, again, I think sort of, about where we are. So what is the nature of the problem? First of all, I would argue there are sort of two problems in some sense. One of them is we have to want to reduce cost. Now, obviously, every program manager will say they want to reduce cost. I mean, nobody obviously wants to have a program that costs too much and takes too long and doesn't get things done and doesn't get done on time. Clearly we do. But what are the consequences of actually reducing cost in a truly major program. Certainly in the United States, I would argue it's probably about the same thing in Europe. First of all, of course, any future problems get blamed on your cost cutting, right? If there are any problems coming up, it's because you cut the cost and you didn't do this particular thing over here. So basically anything that goes wrong with the program is somehow your fault. Your budget, of course, is going to be cut in half. And that budget, the remainder is going to be used to cover the cost overrun in the program that's down the hall a ways. Right? Safe to say it's not really going to go into some new program or some new technology. You're going to lose half your staff that are going to move into some other program or get laid off. Your boss warned you not to eat the cake at your going away party unless you have somebody else taste it first. You're not the world's most popular person, to say the least. Your prime contractor lays off a whole batch of folks. If you're in the United States, at least, you run into a congressman from the prime contractor's district that tells you you'll never get a job in industry. And the program manager that comes in behind you blames you for everything that's gone wrong. Okay? And if instead of being a program manager, you're head of one of the NASA centers or one of the DoD centers, or I suspect the same thing is true with ESA, basically the same sort of thing occurs, except that the people that matter to you have a lot more clout. So on the whole, it's not a good thing for your career to reduce the cost of your program by 50%. It's not something that's going to win you great popularity. You may have done something valuable for the space program collectively, but you probably haven't done something that your organization is dramatically happy about. There's a second problem as well, and that is to say, if I'm going to find and validate in some fashion the ways to reduce cost, it has to be somebody's job to do that. That is to say, somebody has to either take on the job or be assigned the job in some fashion or another of how do I go about doing this. So far as I know, at least, there isn't any organization within, I don't believe within ESA, although there may be. If there is, I'd like to hear about it, NASA or DoD, that regards reducing space mission cost as somehow in its job jar. It's not the case in the United States. I doubt that it's the case here. R&D organizations believe that the job of reducing cost belongs to the individual programs, and the individual programs, by and large, don't particularly want to take on a problem that's relevant to the space industry as a whole. They have enough problem with their own budgets and trying to find ways to get things done within the money they have available. On the whole, dramatically reducing cost is not something that's hugely expensive. Clearly, if it costs billions of dollars to reduce cost, we're probably going the wrong way. That's clearly not the right way to do things. On the other hand, it is hard work, and it's certainly not free. That is to say, it does take work. Somebody has to take the responsibility and foot the bill for developing and validating and defending multiple approaches. Somebody has to support the basic R&D that's there. Somebody has to work with the organizational management to ensure that whatever approaches are adopted are acceptable to the organization. Somebody has to be the expert on what it is that works and what it is that doesn't work in practice. And as I've said, so far as I know, no organization within ESA or NASA has taken on this responsibility for finding ways to drive down cost. And this implies, in some sense, that the high-level management doesn't want to do it. After all, it is reasonably clear that that is what you need. And if somebody comes along, after all, and says, in order to make this program work, we've got to have, I don't know, an advanced star sensor of some sort. Well, what's the first thing management does? They appoint somebody to go look into advanced star sensors, right? I mean, they give somebody a job, say, okay, it's your job to go look at advanced star sensors, and you go out and you find everything you can about advanced star sensors and how they're built and what they're doing and so on and so forth. And, you come back with suggestions and recommendations, and eventually you decide you get to where you want to go. Well, if the managers are reasonably smart after all. If they genuinely want to reduce cost, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to find somebody that's pretty good, that they are willing to listen to, and they're going to say, it's your job to go find ways to reduce cost. I want you to go look, see what's been done, go to a batch of conferences, talk to organizations, go talk to Surrey, go talk to Sierra Nevada or to Microcosm or whomever, find out what it is they're doing. Find out what things would work within our particular organization, what would likely not work, what has worked well in the past, what hasn't worked. Those are fairly straightforward things to do. And yet, on the whole, that doesn't occur very much. And the implication of that, of course, is that there's a set of managers somewhere that in the end are not remarkably enthusiastic about reducing cost. And it's not too hard to see why that's the case, right? I mean, it was what I was talking about on the previous chart. The head of NASA, or rather, let's say the head of Goddard Space Flight Center, comes along and says, okay, I'm going to reduce the cost of Earth science missions, because that would be good for NOAA, that would be good for Earth observations, and so on and so forth. Well, the group it probably wouldn't be good for would be Goddard Space Flight Center. If Goddard can reduce its budget by a factor of 2, this is probably not going to make the director of Goddard Space Flight Center a big hero. Okay? And the same thing is true with almost any other organization. You build an organization, and you build an organization so that it can take on more tasks and do more things. But of course, what you need to do is to get the responsibility to do more things. And that means that your budget wants to go up and the organization wants to grow, just like anything else. I mean, that's what Boeing wants to do, and Lockheed Martin and Airbus and so on. Everybody wants to grow their business. And the same thing is true with the government organizations. So in a sense, a part of the trick here is to say that if we reduce cost, we have the opportunity to increase what it is that we do. If we create small satellites, now we can launch a much larger number of satellites to do the things that we want to do, because there are lots of things that we'd like to do in space that we simply don't have the budget available to do them. So that becomes a part of the trick. That is to say, how do we go out making a trade that says, no, we want to reduce the budget a little bit, but not by a huge amount, but we want to get a lot more done. And how do we do that? We do that by getting more done with each of the satellites that we launch. And that, after all, is a reasonable thing to want to do these days. What is the sort of underlying problem that occurs here? And by the way, I will point out that when we talk about budgets, we need to talk about real money and things like that. I'll talk in dollars just because that's the way I talk, and I apologize for it. So mine is all in US dollars, but I presume other people can translate into euros and pounds and so on. I really better than I can. But just to give you a sense of what it is that's going on. Last 5 years, the United States, at least, has launched a bit more than 100 space missions, about 20 a year, give or take a bit. The combined space budget of the United States is around $60 billion a year. That's roughly equally split between NASA and DoD and the intelligence community. So I think it's pretty safe to say that's larger than most of the European budgets. It's a fairly good chunk of change. But given that we've launched 20 missions a year, the implication of that is space systems launched by the United States have cost an average of $3 billion a launch. Now that includes the infrastructure cost. That includes, chasing the alligators away from KSC and mowing the grass at JSC and all that kind of stuff. But that's a lot of money for each mission. Okay, right now JWST is at $13 billion and counting, and I'm sure it's not stopped yet. It will almost certainly get more expensive than that. And of course, there is a 10% probability that JWST will end up in the Atlantic. Okay? For the last 40 years or so, launches have been roughly 90% successful. And that's been over, almost all of the launch vehicles. Some, the Saturn V was the most expensive, and the lowest cost per pound, and the most successful of all the launch vehicles. And there never did have a failure on the Saturn V. So obviously we stopped building it, of course. How do we go about solving that problem? It's clear that JWST is going to do some rather remarkable things. But it would be much better if we could do something where we had some backup, where we had some alternative approaches. On the whole, that's too much money. My comment up here, too much, too long, and fixing it's going to require that we work hard to fundamentally change the way we do business in space. I think we're making progress. I'll disagree a little bit with Stuart. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think the United States, at least, has quite come to grips with the problem. There is still a lot of opposition to small satellites and to reducing cost, which is intriguing, actually, because, of course, in all of the rest of the industry that we're aware of, it's occurring all the time. I mean, from your phones, your televisions, all of the electronics, iPads, everything else. Think of what those would be like if they were built the way the space program is built. In the space program, it takes us 10 years to get something launched, or more. It's meant to be in orbit for maybe 15 years. That means by the time I'm done, even if everything goes right, I've got something that's built with 25-year-old technology against 25-year-old mission needs and nobody around that knows how to build another one. Okay? What happens if your cell phone technology is 25 years old? You still have a cord attached to it. Right? I mean, technology is advancing remarkably rapidly and becoming remarkably smaller. And of course, smaller is what drives cost in the space business. So it makes a huge amount of sense to use modern technology, but it's very hard to do. It's very much of a challenge in order to be able to do that. So why does all that happen? How did all this come about? Maybe they cost so much in order to achieve 100% mission assurance, but it hasn't happened. Potential mission failures, of course, come from a wide variety of sources. They're clearly launch failures, just mentioned, system failures, collisions, Iridium-33 and Cosmos 2251, operator errors of all sorts, assembly errors. Although the one that doesn't seem to be talked about very much, data unavailable due to cost or schedule overruns or program cancellations. Okay? It doesn't really matter, and this is, Mike Hurley made this point very well at NRL, that to the end user, it doesn't really matter